Hey guys, Rudy here. I wanted to talk about a movie that I saw this morning. It's a kids movie. Um, Went out today with my daughter and wife, and we went and saw Inside Out 2. And I vaguely remember seeing Inside Out 1. I don't remember much about it. But this movie in particular, Inside Out 2, was very very interesting when it comes to like the deeper kind of the deeper hidden meanings involved. Especially with these kids movies. When it comes to some of these kids movies, it's like there's just like so much like just deeper meanings in a lot of these children's movies that nobody really catches, and it's like this one kind of blew my mind, and I wasn't really into it at first. It was kind of around the time when the main character Riley, uh, the main character Riley, goes to a summer camp for hockey players, and she's making a transition from junior high to high school, so she's going to be around a bunch of high schoolers, and it's a little awkward. I think everyone's been through that, so everybody can relate to that. But what got my attention was that her locker number was 33. When I saw the 33, I was like, let me go ahead and start paying attention to this. And what's amazing to me about it is that, like, the whole movie was kind of marketed to be about a coming of age tale for young women, right? Women, young girls becoming teenagers. So they make a really big deal at the beginning of the movie that she's kind of going through puberty, and her little emotions in her mind are like being taken over by these new emotions. And her original kind of emotions when she was a child, quote unquote, was joy, sadness, fear, anger, and disgust. And as she's going through puberty, like starts developing these new emotions. Like the whole movie's about emotions. That's what the pun is for Inside Out. It kind of switches back and forth between the real world, quote unquote, and the inside of Riley's mind, which would be these kind of cartoon characters, which would that represent her emotions, like what's going on in her mind. So you can think of these characters as Riley, like her entirety, like her sense of self. They make a big deal about a sense of self, but these new emotions kind of begin taking over, and the old emotions are kind of pushed to the side. And this is all happening psychologically, right? It's happening in her head. Um, it's kind of my gripe with the movies that they didn't super emphasize that too much, but it's implied, at least. Because a lot of people are gonna watch this movie and just think it's some cute movie, right? But it was very striking to me that this was all psychological. This was all like spiritual in a way, and you're gonna understand why when I kind of get to the spiritual part. But these new emotions take over, which would be anxiety, embarrassment, envy, and ennui, which means like I think it's like French for aloofness or boredom, sarcasm, stuff like that. It's like a state of mind where you're kind of like sarcastic or whatever is called ennui, Ennui. This I can show it. Ennui. This character, this kind of depressed emo-ish character. So these new emotions take over, and the main emotion is like anxiety, which is this kind of goofy looking thing. Whatever this is, looks kind of reminds me of a Fraggle Rock, sort of a Muppet kind of character, but she kind of takes over the main console to her emotions. You can see the console right here. Here, let me make it bigger. There's kind of this console that they use to control Riley, in a way. So, like this movie's marketed to children, but when we got through watching it, we're driving in the car, and I asked both my wife and my kid, how'd y'all like the movie? And they said, oh, it was fine, it's a cute movie, and I was like, and I asked my wife in particular, it's like, did you learn anything from it? Because anxiety's a big part of anxiety's a big part of a lot of adults' lives, especially women. Um, women tend to try to control the future, if that makes sense. Men do this too, right? But there's a real heavy emphasis on anxiety, wanting to control outcomes, right? Control the future. And I've said on my channel many times that in my past presentations, I've said many times that there is no such thing as a future. There's only the present. So this movie has a heavy emphasis on the past and the future, and then you have Riley in the present at all times, right? And these events are happening in the now, and that's what as the movie plays out, anxiety comes to terms with this idea that she can't control everything. And so does the main character, the other main emotion, which would be joy. And there's a picture of them two together. Um, so we got joy and anxiety, which are two kind of polar opposites, but sort of one and the same. They're kind of shown to be in the same category of emotions that want to be in control all the time. And that's like kind of the main theme where Riley doesn't really know how to balance her emotions very well. It's done brilliantly, by the way, for children to understand. And the adults aren't gonna give a fuck, right? The adults, because in the theater, everyone just kind of laughs at the cheesy dialogue. So the adults in the theater aren't really gonna really understand the spiritual nature of this and what it signifies. Just like Riley, many adults in the real world, in our world, the adults in your lives, and maybe even yourself as an adult listening to me, tend to try to fit in. And in the movie, Riley goes to this camp, this hockey camp, and has to mingle with the high school kids who are trying to get into this hockey team for high school, which is like the best of the best in the district or something like that, best of the best in the region. Let's just say the region. I don't remember the details. Details don't matter, but there's always a heavy emphasis in Riley's life. Like right at the beginning of the movie, they have a heavy emphasis on Riley being the best and making good grades and being number one. And her parents kind of pushing her in that direction all the time. And we'll get into that in a little bit because I got opinions about that. So you have people attempting to fit in, right? And Billy from Stardust Simulation likes to talk about this, where we're always trying to find commonalities with each other, and we're always trying to figure out what you've done in your life, right? So adults do this. It's not just limited to teenagers or young children becoming teenagers. It's not just limited to them trying to fit in. This applies to adults. This applies to all people. So many adults, many people would benefit from seeing this movie and applying it to their own lives. But you know how it goes, You got adults, or you got parents or grandparents taking their children to see these movies, and they just think it's a cute little movie to watch, and it's one ear and out the other, right? These messages are for the adults as well. And the big thing, one of the big takeaways to me right at the beginning was this heavy emphasis on Riley having to be number one and the pressures of all the adults around her to be number one at everything, to be a number one student, a number one child to her parents. Like she's the best hockey player in her junior high school. So she gets into high school and realizes the bar is really high. And she kind of meets her hero, person she looks up to, that plays for the high school team, the Firehawks. I think they're called the Firehawks. There's a picture right here. That's the girl right there. Of course, there's people like to project their LGBT nonsense onto it, but it was nothing like that. That's besides the point. I didn't get any weird gay vibes from this movie. So it's these people are gonna project this nonsense no matter what it is. They think every character is LGBT. So it's whatever. But back on topic, Riley's pressured to be number one all the time, right? So it's before I get into that, I'll talk about what happened in the movie. Well, so the new emotions take over, and the old emotions began creating a sense of self for her. which is I'll show images. That'll be the easiest thing to do. So this little thing right here that the anxiety character's kind of pulling off is the is her old sense of self that she's developed since she's been a newborn, right? So 13 years developing this sense of self, and suddenly she has to fit into it with a new crowd. And she kind of hangs out with not with losers, I wouldn't say that. She hangs out with friends who still kind of have the mindset of a, like, let's say a 12-year-old, where they still like child things. Like they made a joke that Riley was really into some band, like some weird boy band that children only tend to like, and you know, the older kids kind of made fun of her a little bit. So in order for her to fit in, her ennui takes over, which is the sarcasm emotion, and says, "Oh yeah, I really like that band," or something like that, and trying to seem cool in front of her new friends, the high schoolers, and kind of completely ditches her two best friends in the process. So she's being kind of a terrible person to these friends, and the whole reason for this is because the old emotions got kicked out of the command center, quote unquote, which is like this thing right here. This would be like the command center. And the old emotions over here got kicked out. They got the boot, and the new ones kind of took over. So the new emotions take over, and they rip out the sense of self, like anxiety does here. She rips out the old sense of self, which would be like her morals, right? The morals that she's kind of worked on since she was a child. And she begins developing this kind of fake personality, and a bit more of a kind of a narcissistic personality, like a very selfish personality where she's only really thinking about herself and trying to benefit herself. Like, she really wants to get on this hockey team for the next year going into high school, so she ditches her two friends. It's not being very kind to them. So basically, and the movie doesn't touch on this, and this is basically my only really real gripe with this movie, is that they didn't put an emphasis on the adults in her life and Riley's life that were putting pressure on her to be the best of the best, right? Like, it was because of this kind of phony, fake, like, material wrapped crap, this material focused stuff, accolade focused mentality that kind of pushed her into this split personality in a way, because she wanted to be the best. So it's like, if it wasn't for her parents sitting her down and saying, you can be good at hockey and have fun without, you know, being a bitch about it, essentially. And another thing about this movie that I really liked was, they didn't make a big deal about this, but just to be perfectly clear, I'm kind of projecting this onto this movie a little bit, or I am projecting this onto this movie. Just to be perfectly transparent with my audience, I am projecting things that I've talked about onto this movie before, because I see it. So, in the movie, Riley goes to this summer camp. There's this idea that, just to talk about the story of Buddha real quick. To me, part of the reason Buddha achieved enlightenment was getting away from his family, like getting away from his crazy father, because the story of Buddha goes that he was the son of a king, right? Who was kind of pampered until one day he saw like the low lives on the street, like if you can imagine the ladies with the gnarled fingers, or, you know, the lepers or the vagabonds or the street beggars in the street, and this was like a culture shock to Buddha. So he basically, just to give a long story short, he decides to leave the palace and go explore the world on his own. And that was the journey to achieving enlightenment, was getting away from his comfort zone, essentially, getting away from his parents, getting away from his family. And I've talked about this before, where Once you get away from your blood relatives, away from your parents, you'll begin finding your sense of self, and you will achieve enlightenment from it. You'll find the real you. So this is what happened to Riley. She gets away from her mother and father so that she's finally allowed to begin developing her sense of self. So in a sense, it was like with purpose. In a sense, it's like her parents kind of drove her to have this personality split, which led her to achieving enlightenment, to achieving her sense of self, finding her sense of self. And in the movie, the 5 emotions that get exiled from the command center, they get exiled into the back of the mind with the rest of the bad memories that Joy, the main character Joy, one of the main characters, like Joy begins, at the start of the movie, Joy begins suppressing all of her bad memories. And later on, anxiety comes along and exiles them into the back of the mind the way Joy was. Joy was getting rid of all of Riley's bad memories in order to only keep the good ones, right? And that's not how you operate in life. You have to take the good with the bad and kind of examine the bad memories in order to, like this movie does, in order to find your sense of self. That was the main takeaway for the movie, was that even the bad memories have to like coexist with the good memories in order to find your true self. And that's what happened to Riley at the end. Like, she achieved enlightenment. They even had a scene where she looks up at the sun and the sun shines down on her. Like, to me, that's just crystal clear evidence that she achieved enlightenment. Okay? And I've said this before, you don't have to sit under a tree and meditate to achieve enlightenment. Like, she achieved enlightenment from just being in a hockey camp, a summer camp. It's like, how ridiculous is that? Like, when it happened to me, I was at work in the middle of the damn paper goods aisle. So it's like, it just can happen at any time, at any moment. But the main point to me was her sense of self was within her already. Like, the answers to her problems, like all of these mixed emotions going crazy and this anxiety going out of control, like all of it was within her already to solve her problem. And at the end, they're playing the final game of hockey between the split teams at the camp, and she's on the cool kids team, and her 2 other friends are kind of on the other team where she's kind of ignoring them and stuff, and they're playing hockey, and Riley's basically being a puck hog, and even against her own teammates, like trying to score, trying to prove that she's the best. Like, kind of just goes crazy to the point where she ends up injuring her hero, like I forgot her name, but she ends up injuring her new friend, and she feels really bad about it. She gets sent to the penalty box for 2 minutes by the coach. This is when she has her enlightenment. She has a complete breakdown in the penalty box, and this is when all these bad emotions come crawling back up, all these bad memories, come flooding back. And in the movie, they show what happens in the mind, all that. That's not really important to me. Like, the parts the cutaways to her mind, to me, weren't the most important part. Like, what was happening in Riley's present reality was the more important part, in a way, because the things that they showed in her mind was just like visual kind of gags, like just for entertainment's sake, kind of explaining what's going on in the mind. And I don't necessarily mind that. It was okay. It was entertaining. They had some really funny moments that I actually liked, believe it or not. But I was more interested in the way her real world was playing out in line with these emotions, which the movie does, but it spends an awful lot of time in her mind with these kind of cutaway gags and stuff, and it gets a little old. I was like, all right, let's move along. But so essentially, Riley couldn't have achieved enlightenment until she got away from her parents, like, because she wouldn't be able to find her sense of self if she's always under her parents' wings. Like, it doesn't work that way. This is why you'll find that a lot of males who in their, 30s and 40s still living with their parents that just aren't like they're just infantile. They just stay boys. And this is kind of the same and like I said, this movie doesn't touch on this at all. I'm just telling you this is what's going on. And the writers didn't intend for this message to be put out there, but I'm giving an example. Like, the writers weren't thinking like this. The writers weren't thinking like I do. And like I said, my only gripe with the movie was that it didn't address the issue with the parents and their expectations, and how that caused anxiety. Because when anxiety took over, it was all about making the team or impressing the high schoolers. That's all anxiety cared about. And they made a big old deal about projection in the movie, like literally projection with a projector. Like, it had one scene where there's a bunch of cubicles like made of poker cards everywhere. And they're basically animating with animation cells, like old school animation cells, and writing out storyboards for ideas for anxiety to use that Riley could use, like just on how to get popular and how to get on the team, or how to impress her new friend, and all that. So in the end, this metaphysical truth in children's movies is it's just crazy to me how these kind of messages are just kind of embedded in these stories. Like, they can't get away from these metaphysical truths in these kind of movies. And nobody's gonna see it but me, to be honest. Like, this idea of Riley achieving enlightenment because she got away from her crazy parents is probably the most important probably the most important aspect to this movie that they could have ever said, but they're not going to place emphasis on that, obviously. But to me, it's like the symbolism's there. I mean, the light literally shined down on Riley as she had these realizations, because she's like walking by a window, and she has this enlightening experience where she realizes that all of her emotions kind of needed to join together in order to make her like a new sense of self. And the good and the bad memories needed to be on the surface in order for her to find the real her, like the real you. And the last scene's kind of funny because she finally gets home after a 3-day summer camp, and it's like they're sitting at the breakfast table with mom and dad, and the mom's like, "Oh hey, so how was summer camp?" or whatever. And it cuts to Riley's emotions, and when the weed takes over, the boredom emotion, and Riley just goes, "Oh, it's fine," just keeps on eating, like doesn't elaborate. It's no big deal, despite having this crazy experience in her mind, right? This enlightening spiritual experience in her head. And then it flashes to the mother's emotions, where her anger takes over. Like, the mother's anger emotion takes over in her mind and goes, like, what does she mean? She's been gone for 3 days and all we get is an it's okay. So, she's all getting mad and everything. And cuts to the father's point of view, his mind, and it's just the anger. I don't know. It was the anger emotion sitting in like an easy chair, and they're all kind of watching the projection. And he has like a kind of a anger response for like a half second, then he goes, sounds about right, and it just flashes back out. So it just goes to show you, like, without even saying it, like, I can't believe they had a scene like that where the mother flips out and the dad's just calm. Like, to me, that was the icing on the cake. I was like, yeah, that's pretty much how it goes. No, it was the anxiety emotion for the mother, actually. Not the anxiety, yeah, it was the anxiety emotion, now to think about it. It wasn't anger, it was anxiety at the end with the mother. And they cut earlier in the movie. They cut to the mother's emotion center, and her anxiety was at the helm. It was like at the forefront of the command center. Just like Riley's was. Oh, you know what's funny? I didn't notice. I didn't even catch that before because the mother's anxiety was at the forefront at the beginning of the movie, and as the movie goes on, anxiety begins taking over for Riley because. Oh man, that's super interesting. I didn't even catch that. So, the anxiety emotion begins to take over for Riley because it was being passed down through the mother. It wasn't actually Riley's anxiety, it was her mother's anxiety. Yeah, that's pretty much how it goes and how it plays out in the real world. If you step back, guys, for half a second and realize where all your anger and anxiety comes from, you will find out that it's from your mother. And that's really the to me, now that I've kind of discovered that just talking about it in real time, that's exactly what it was. Y'all have a great day. I was kind of editing my presentation just now, and I just kind of realized that I actually stumbled on an article as I was talking about anxiety, about how adults better understand their anxiety thanks to this movie. And this kind of blows my mind, actually. I read it ahead of time. But on this paragraph right here is probably the best takeaway you'll ever get. This person, Barb Baker. I don't know who Barb Baker is. I guess they're probably some kind of influencer. So she saw the movie and realized that anxiety has steered her wheel of life all of her life. I'll just read it off. Baker's father died when she was a kid, and sitting in the theater, she realized she hadn't fully moved on. I was still 6 years old, mourning his passing, void of joy, and pretending to show others how strong I was, she says. That realization became an eye-opening and healing moment for me. And according to this article anyway, a lot of people in her comment section of her TikTok video shared the same sentiment. And this actually gives me a lot of hope because, and it's kind of frustrating in a way, that it takes a damn kids movie to get people to pay attention. That it takes a kids movie to get people to pay attention to their lives like this. And this is why I make videos, by the way. It's like, because of this. This is amazing. So, reading on here, thanks to anxiety, Riley starts having a panic attack mid-hockey game and tells herself she's not good enough. We were all teenagers once. A lot of the adults who were relating to the show are now starting to put those pieces of the puzzle together because of this stuff. Anxiety wasn't talked about back then like it is now. And this has a double-edged sword. It's like a double-edged sword in a way when it comes to anxiety, because a lot of people, it's like words are magic, you know? And people will use this label anxiety to pathologize others, which runs the risk of kind of creating more narcissists in a way, because anytime, and I've seen this before, this was before this movie came out, this trend of people saying my anxiety whenever they do some bullshit that they're not supposed to, instead of just owning up to it, which is what Riley did in the movie. She owned up to her behavior when it came to her friends, and she didn't let the excuse of anxiety keep her down. But I guarantee you a lot of people are going to use this as an excuse to be terrible. And that's what I mean by it's like a double-edged sword. And only a few are going to actually wake up. Okay? So, but this still gives me hope. It's so gratifying to see adults talking about their experience with their own anxiety and sense of self. It's a co-writer for Inside Out 2. It's always an intention when you're doing a story to speak your authentic truth to the audience so that they can receive it and have the catharsis with you. I couldn't, in my wildest dreams, imagine this. It feels a little bit like winning the lottery. Anyway, guys, that'll probably wrap it up for the very end here. I wish I would have caught this sooner, because I definitely would have talked about it, but it is what it is now. Y'all have a nice day.